Hey, do you remember that whole COVID thing? The potentially nasty, but in most cases mild virus? You know, the respiratory bug we all but destroyed the economy and society trying to stop. The one a third of people would have no symptoms from and were told to pretend they had. Act like you've got it. Remember that campaign? Well, COVID is back. The Guardian report that COVID infections in the UK have risen by more than 30%. That's right, 30% in a week, with an estimated 2.3 million people thought to have had the disease in late June. Plus, there's a slight rise in hospitalisations. On the 30th of June, there were 9,000 patients with COVID in hospital, 9,000 with COVID in hospital in England, up from 6.5 the previous week. Now, that sounds worrying, doesn't it? Except that those numbers include people who are not in hospital for or with COVID, but who have tested positive whilst being treated for something else, like a twisted ankle or a bad back. So they're not in hospital with COVID as such. But hey, why let the facts get in the way of a good story? For 2.5 years, these terrifying COVID statistics, so beloved of the media, have been as misleading as a Gary Barlow tax return. So millions of people currently have COVID. Not pleasant at all. Absolutely not. But given that people are not dropping like flies in their local Tesco, I think you can safely say the growing hysteria is unwarranted. That won't stop it, of course. Even though Omicron is milder than the jokes in Last of the Summer Wine, we've seen countless quadruple-vaxxed celebrities and public figures announcing on Twitter they have COVID, ironically undermining the case for their beloved jab. We've seen one particular leading UK TV presenter this week record videos from the luxury of his spare bedroom, of course, being given what looked like his last rites. He was talking about people shielding. Tie down your mother, he said, each to their own, and lock up your daughters. Use of lock up, quite the Freudian slip there. All of this before doing a TikTok dance video. That's right, a TikTok dance video, and being back on telly later that week. Miraculous recovery. Well, here's a comment which I made this week, which went viral. I think it touched a nerve with many. I wrote, may I humbly suggest a ban on people announcing via Twitter they have COVID. Never before has a disease been worn with such pride or enthusiasm. It's almost like it's subtle ammunition for more ruinous, failed measures. Welcome to hell. That was my view, and that remains my view. Now, those who wish to get back to normal life, help with the economic recovery and put the last 2 years behind us, which is most people, have a stubborn obstacle. That obstacle is what I call the COVID industry. That's right, this is the first virus in history to have had its own marketing campaign, with the government spending millions scaring the bejesus out of us and with media outlets amplifying the fear porn as a grateful thanks for the advertising income. Manufacturers have made billions from masks, those hellish plastic screens everywhere, PCR tests, hand sanitizer and all the rest of it. Software companies have made a fortune from the apps and the tracking, which resolutely failed at a cost to you and me of £34 billion. Fast food companies have coined it with junk food deliveries, and Amazon have crushed the high street by bringing the high street to your front door. And then there's the vaccine, which for the notoriously unethical pharmaceutical industry has been the greatest gold rush in history. Don't get me wrong, anyone who risks serious illness or death from COVID would be mad not to have the jab, in my view. If I'm 80, overweight and suffering asthma, I'll take more needles than Pete Doherty. But jabbing healthy kids? Over my dead body. Over 2 disastrous years, these hellish so-called experts who are now resurfacing like unwanted mildew in your shower took our willing hand and walked us into hell, aided and abetted by numerous high-profile TV and radio broadcasters. Remember those government press conferences? Why didn't we lock down sooner? Asked the journalists. They wanted all of the measures, longer, harder, faster. If that's what you want, dear, go and live in China. You won't be missed. That footage from Singapore of people screaming with hunger and thirst out of their apartment block windows was as close to hell on earth as you will get. That's what zero COVID looks like. What about Saint Jacinda Ardern, the Kiwi Mussolini, begging viewers of British daytime TV this week to visit police state New Zealand? Good luck with that. I even feel sorry for the sheep in that once great country. I expect the siren calls for COVID measures to get louder in the weeks and months to come. So many of these medics and scientists, in my view, got it so wrong. They shouldn't be on TV. They should be in exile now, atoning for their mistakes and their crimes. And the modelers who consistently, wildly overstated the risk of COVID should frankly be locked up. What were they all thinking? $500 billion borrowed to pay healthy people to stay at home, to stand by as their once viable businesses closed down. Collapsed marriages, impounded cars, repossessed homes, damaged, diminished lives, especially kids and young people, future generations being born into an ocean of debt, all at the hands of these siren lockdown voices, which are shamelessly coming back to haunt us. The reason why these measures are so popular is because they involve controlling people. The powers that be and sado scientists have been getting off on telling us what to do, covering our faces, keeping us at home, and punishing anyone that tries to actually live their life. Not everyone will share my view, but we can all at least agree that the COVID measures were damaging. So how much more do you want? We've got almost 10% inflation. Shall we have 20%? 30%? The national debt is over $2 trillion, payable by our kids and grandkids. Should we go to 3 or 4 trillion? Britain is broke and broken, all thanks to echo chamber scientists who refuse to listen to other voices. Thanks to weak politicians who panicked and caved into the pressure, and privileged media figures who were cheerleaders for all of this and for whom it was all a game. I've been calling out this madness on the national airwaves since April 2020. It's all online. Have a dig and watch it all back. And I'm not alone. One of the most renowned medics on the planet, Professor of Medicine at Stanford University and infectious disease expert, Professor Bhattacharya, has called the COVID measures the biggest public health mistake in history. And he knows his onions. I cannot and will not see any more damage done to our country and our society in an ongoing experiment that future generations will look back at with incredulity. I will have no part in future lockdowns, worthless mask mandates, obligatory vaccines, PCR tests, social bubbles. I'm not having any of it. Whilst the siren calls for more measures will of course come, I believe that the silent majority who now want to move on and know that we need to move on will get louder. The last 2.5 years have taught us that if we give these stubborn, closed-minded and heartless technocrats an inch, they'll take a mile. 3 weeks to flatten the curve, a statement that's aged about as well as dear old Joe Biden. God bless him. And of course, we've got the laughable inquiry. £4 million a year it's going to cost, the COVID inquiry. And it will take years and years to conclude. And it will be a bigger stitch-up than Sharon Osbourne's last facelift. We don't need a bloody inquiry. No discernible difference between countries that had strict measures and others that did not. That shows how wrong it all was. In many cases, including Sweden and states in America like Florida and Texas, lighter measures produced better outcomes. Go figure. And of course, a fraction of the damage. The truth is that we complied with these measures because we wanted them to end, except that our compliance meant they never would. And now the scientists and commentators who have done so much damage to this country are back. And they want to do it all over again. We are trapped on a hellish roller coaster, and it's time to get off. Just say no.